Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, one of the last holdouts in terms of mask mandates has finally fallen, and that is Washington, D.C. schools. While many districts across the country began relaxing their COVID-19 masking requirements weeks or even months earlier, the nation's capital kept masking children due to the Centers for Disease Control's fervent belief that mask mandates make a meaningful dent in coronavirus transmission. Despite COVID-19 cases crashing and deaths and hospitalizations decreasing markedly, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has kept elements of the mandates in place. Schools, yes. Gyms, no. Public transportation, yes. Churches, no. Libraries, yes. Restaurants, no. And on and on and on. So you'd be forgiven for thinking there isn't actually anything scientific about this. But in any event, the Alliance Defending Freedom is suing D.C. to force the city to let private Catholic schools go without mask mandates. Bowser finally gave in and said, sure, private schools can do whatever they want. And now she's really giving in because even public schools will be allowed to go mask optional starting this Wednesday. Quote, I want to strongly reiterate that all our students and staff welcome to continue to wear a mask if they choose, and we will actively promote a climate where this choice is respected, D.C. Public Schools Chancellor Louis Farabee said in a Friday letter. Now, across the river in Virginia, many schools have been maskless for a while. But what I hear from parents of kids in those schools is that there's tremendous social pressure actually to keep masking. The kids who do not wear masks are derided as disease spreaders, or worse, as Trump supporters. That's how seriously many liberal parents take masking, and it's because masking has been relentlessly reinforced by public health officials, Democratic politicians, the mainstream media, celebrities. Well, not at the Super Bowl or the award shows, mind you, but you get the idea. So here's something interesting, however. A new paper, which in full disclosure has not yet been peer-reviewed, but is interesting nonetheless, found that school mask mandates didn't make very much of a difference in terms of the transmission of COVID-19. What's so interesting about this paper is that it was able to make a fairly direct comparison. So this paper looked at students in Catalonia and Spain, where there were school-wide mask mandates for kids ages 6 to 11, but not for kids ages 3 to 5. So the preschools were allowed to be unmasked. There were about 600,000 students in total who were part of the study, and what the study found was that the older kids were more likely to get COVID in general. The secondary attack rate, that is the rate of transmission from infected individuals to the people in their social circles, was not really statistically different between the 5-year-olds and the 6-year-olds. The 5-year-olds unmasked, the 6-year-olds masked, and are not the base reproduction number for COVID. It was similar in both groups, around 0.9, slightly less than 1. So the collected data was based on the fall 2021 semester, so that's during the Delta wave in Spain. The study's conclusion was that mask mandates in schools were not associated with lower SARS-CoV-2 incidence or transmission, suggesting that this intervention, the mask mandates, was just not very effective. Instead, age dependency was the most important factor in explaining the transmission risk for children attending school, end quote. How interesting. Obviously, this study cuts against the CDC's quasi-religious beliefs that mask mandates were an important way to fight COVID-19 in schools. As I've explained in previous radars, the studies that the CDC has relied upon to defend its thesis in favor of mask mandates, well, those studies are extremely flawed. The main one, a study of Arizona schools, was debunked by The Atlantic, which is hardly some bastion of contrarian COVID denialism. Indeed, the faith in school mask mandates is a uniquely American belief. The World Health Organization does not recommend mask requirements for small children, and it thinks masks should in general be optional, even for older kids. The European Center for Disease Prevention and Control did not recommend masks for primary school students at all. Not just because mask mandates may not be as effective at containing COVID-19 as American health officials have claimed, that doesn't mean masks are useless or don't work. Masks can work. They can limit the spread, and anyone who wants to enjoy some extra protection from disease, you can feel free to wear a mask. One-way masking is a thing that even the CDC now recognizes. But look, it's hard to take a gander at all the available data and conclude that requiring masks in schools put a significant dent in cases. And that data comes from the Delta wave. Omicron was probably even more adept at evading the masks in terms of everyone getting it, regardless of what kind of mitigation efforts they were following. So why do I bring this up? COVID-19 is quickly fading from the news cycle, having been suddenly displaced by the war in Ukraine. And with any hope, this might very well be my last radar on school mask mandates. They are finally going away, and I am glad. I couldn't be happier. But let's not completely forget that the U.S. government pushed these mask mandates on us. First, it was supposed to be for a short period of time. Then it was until vaccines were available. Then it was until they're widely available. Then it was until enough people had taken them. Then it was until people just gradually ran out of patience, I guess. After months and months of wrestling masks onto teenagers while they exercised outdoors, onto airline passengers in between bites of food, onto screaming toddlers at daycare centers, we're finding out that maybe, just maybe, they didn't make quite as much of a difference as we were led to believe. Oh well, I guess.
Well, they're still masking, like on a lot of like airplanes.
Airplanes still masking.
So this might not be your last radar on.
And I was checking. I haven't talked about this in a while, but as much as I complain about the school mask mandates, university, college masking policies are still the most insane of ever. And we're talking about like the safest. I guess maybe they're not quite as safe as very young children, but they are vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So the able-bodied young people who are required to be vaccinated at college campuses. Many of them are still masked in very wide. I get emails still from the University of Michigan. This is where I graduated. And they just said that you no longer have to wear masks in most places, but they're still going to have to wear them in class.
And a lot of them are even boosted. They're required to have boosters.
Required to be boosted.
Yeah. And maybe even a fourth now that Pfizer came out saying you got to get a fourth one.
And it's just like, for what?
And
what?
What's interesting about this particular debate, though, is that YouTube insists that you follow World Health Organization guidelines. And World Health Organization on masks has been much more flexible than a lot of schools have been.
Right.
On their own website, decisions about mask use in children should be driven by what is in the best interest of the child. Mask use should be flexible so that children can continue play, education, and everyday activities. These activities are an important part of child development and health. No child should be denied access to school or activities because of lack of a mask. That's the World Health Organization.
But YouTube also says they not only follow WHO, but
what do you do when they disagree?
CDC and other.
And they are in slight conflict. The CDC, the American health authorities, have been far, far more pro-masking, especially pro-masking of young people, than their counterparts in Europe.
Yeah, but when I talk to parents, a lot of them say, well, look at Asia, and the Asian kids are wearing masks to school. So if they can adhere to it and look at the low rates of spread over there, then it must work, and we must do it over here as well. And so I think they're pointing to these other societies and saying, look, they have low rates of spread, so let's do everything they're doing. And I understand that logic completely, but I think there might be, I'm not 100% certain if kids in Asia, once they get into the classroom, if they keep that mask on. I do know that in many Asian societies, I'm sure it does, and I'm sure it depends on the case rates, but I do know that we see all these photographs of all these Asian people wearing masks and everybody's complying, but a lot of it is they do have a culture of wearing masks on public transport and when they're going to and from places, but not necessarily once they get inside. So it'd be interesting to see those photographs, but that's what a lot of people are pointing to.
Yeah, and I remember very early when Fauci was saying, don't worry about masks. They could be even counterproductive, when he was basically lying so that people wouldn't go out and get them. I remember thinking, I don't believe him, because I have been seeing Asian American people on buses and subways for years wearing them. They're not idiots. Like, if they're wearing them, it's because they have some experience with them in the past where they worked for them. Like, if it worked good enough for them, good enough for me.
I remember I used to see, when you'd see those people on airplanes or in the airport or whatever, I remember I would think, how germophobic are you or something? That's what I would think.
Well, in Asia, I think a lot of them wore the masks for pollution.
Well, yes, and also they had other SARS that whipped through over the last 10, 15 years that didn't become global pandemics, thank God.
Right. Well, they didn't infect that many people, so I think it was, I mean.
But that's
pollution is
that's
a big
part of it too, yeah.
Right. Well, that was our 3 COVID radar of the day.
Masks are good for also kitty litter when you're changing the kitty litter.
Really?
Yeah, you're not going to breathe in that disgusting kitty litter.
Good point. I've never, because I'm always changing my cat.
If I have it,
yeah, we have cats.
You're both cat people and dog people. I'm just a dog person.
You need to get a cat.
A whole zoo at home.
Not gonna get a cat. Well, our rising panel is next, and we'll discuss the criticisms around Tulsi Gabbard's latest comments on Ukraine. Stick around.